Hello and welcome to Culture Illiterate, a podcast where four friends overthink comic book movies. I am one of your hosts, Jake. As of recording this, my hair is longer than it's ever been, and I'm quite happy about that. It was a goal. With me are my friends and fellow co-hosts.
My name is Jason, and one of my earliest memories in life is the weird-ass music video for Sugar We're Going Down by Fall Out Boy.
That's super interesting, Jason. Anyway, my fun fact is that this is technically our second recording, and the other fun fact is that it's Jake's fault, so please reprimand him in the comments if you ever do comment. I want our first comment to just be someone just trash-talking Jake, just really, really badly.
Okay, Matt has caused issues like 50 minutes into episodes before. My software just gave me a warning 30
That's
seconds
all in the
and
past.
we started over.
No
so
one
let's not
fucking
act
cares
like
about
we
the
can
past.
fucking compare here, buddy.
So
This is
exactly
equitable.
We're in the now, Jake.
You're talking about the past, Jake. We're talking about right now. We're talking about today. We're talking about practice. Come on, not a game.
Oh, dear God. All right. I guess it's my turn then, or did Matt go?
Matt went.
Okay, good. All right. So my name's Sean. My fun fact is that, Jake, did you see the changes I made to the script?
I saw one.
All right, good. I just wanted to make sure you saw it.
That's so menacing.
I had another fun fact, but I can't remember it now that I changed the welcome in the script to welcome. So let's continue.
A subtle but important difference. Well, I actually kind of wanted to, in a sense, backtrack a little bit, just because I finally watched one of Jason's previous recs this week, Intergalactic.
Finally.
Haven't listened through the album yet, but I just wanted to bring it up since it was something that Jason had wrecked before, and now I can circle back and say I also wreck it. It's really enjoyable, and I also didn't realize that it's not by any measure like the main plot or main point of the movie. I wasn't expecting or aware of the fact that Intergalactic kind of really concisely and accurately skewers the comic industry. That I just thought it was worth noting because I actually kind of tie it in. I believe I previously recommended the comic series Public Domain, both written and drawn by Chip Zdarsky. And I just kind of wanted to bring it up because in a way, I think they kind of pair well together. I think sometimes you have like two pieces of art in different mediums that fit together unintentionally from different artists that just feel like accidental companion pieces. And a lot of the vibes of the two and just that element of Intergalactic kind of pair. So I just thought that was a little neat and kind of wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, it's not a main focus, but there's definitely, like, at certain points, it touches on kind of, like, the corporate machine ruining art, which is, I think, kind of what you're getting at there. So that's a good point.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that you brought that up. I'm glad you watched it and liked it. I recommend the album even more than the film. So
yeah, I want to get to that too. I just feel like it was worth bringing up, since I think that's the first time that's happened with one of us kind of.
That also reminds me that I do still need to watch that, so at least that'll put that on my radar again.
I definitely wreck it. Still, like, obviously I wrecked it when it came out, but still I wreck it. I still go back and think about it sometimes. I just think the animation's fantastic, if nothing else.
I have a rec, actually. Mine is for a game. I started playing a game called Cereza and the Lost Demon. It is actually very cute and very sweet and wholesome, as opposed to Bayonetta, which is usually not.
Are they, like, made by the same company?
Yep.
Like, what? Okay,
they're made by the same company. It's a prequel to Bayonetta. About her as like a 10-year-old,
and she's sweet and adorable, and then she grows up to slap.
Thank God
in the
it's
ass.
more wholesome,
and I mean in the most sexy way possible.
So it's really weird, but it's really wholesome and just very sweet. It's just really strange to imagine that, hey, she grows up and ooh.
I want to wreck the new Fall Out Boy album. I mentioned Fall Out Boy as being one of my earliest memories earlier on. That is very true. So not even just that music video, but in general, Fall Out Boy is some of my earliest memories listening to them with our sister Haley. Shout out Haley for helping me become emo later in life, as well as Jake. Jake's a big part of my music taste because
That's going all to her head.
it is definitely going all to her head. But I believe you actually were a spearhead in me getting into Fall Out Boy, if I remember correctly.
I mean, I think we both were. Haley does deserve credit there, but yeah, I was really into Sugar We're Going Down, and we used to get report card books if we had a good report card from our parents. And one time I begged and begged and begged to get from Under the Cork Tree instead of a book.
Right, and I
did get it.
And I adore that album, by the way, and own that album. So I bring all that up to just say that Fall Out Boy is a band that's very, very important to me. They carried on through just that nostalgia of being one of my earliest memories, and to this day I still listen back to their first 4 records and think that they've aged incredibly. They mean so much to me as a band. They've shaped my opinions on music, my who I am as a person so much. And if you don't know, Fall Out Boy kind of had a bit of a, when they came back after their reunion, went a bit more of a different and, in my opinion, very bad direction. They were known for being experimental, but I feel like they went kind of downhill. This album, I feel, returns to form so much. It still feels experimental. There's still aspects of other genres that I know Pete Wentz and Patrick Stump love so much, and I see that coming through, but it still feels, it's still Fall Out Boy, and they're still there. It's still their, their kind of vibe, and it feels, if I had to compare it to one of their previous albums, I would say Infinity on High. So if you like that album, I recommend it. I think lyrically it's one of the best they've put out in years. For example, Hold Me Like a Grudge has a lyric, part-time soulmate, full-time problem, so Hold Me Like a Grudge, I love that. Everything is here except my serotonin. I love that lyric very, very much. But yeah, this, I think, if you're like me and became a disillusioned Fall Out Boy fan after their past couple records, this album, I think, brings back everything that I personally loved about Fall Out Boy and made me feel a way that I haven't felt in years listening to Fall Out Boy.
I also agree with Jason. I got to listen to the full album, and it was very, very good.
Yeah, it definitely grew on me as well. The first listen, I didn't love it too much. I liked certain songs, but listening through over and over again, I adore it.
Yeah, there was some that took a little bit more to fall in love with, but I think all around, it was great.
Yeah, there's a good interlude that uses a monologue from Ethan Hawke. That's kind of sweet, and it goes well into the next song. It's a very cohesive album. I think that's what I'm most impressed by. I think these days in popular music, it's so common for things to be based around singles, and this album just feels cohesive as the whole album, and I love that personally.
I'll have to check it out. I add it to my list after Intergalactic, maybe. You see, because I haven't listened. I still like their classics, but I haven't listened to them as much of late, and similarly don't have as much of a relationship with their post comeback stuff. So you saying that intrigues me as a way to potentially go back and almost relive, so get some nostalgia with something new.
Yeah, I think it definitely feels like Fall Out Boy, but it's not like they just regurgitated the same bullshit again. It's definitely a more mature look at the same kind of vibe, I feel.
So I also, before we get into the core of the episode, I feel like I have to make a public apology, because as I'm sure you all recall, last episode we established the Hall of Him, and of course voted in Wesley Snipes' Blade and Michael Keaton's Batman. But I think there is a third initial member of movies we've watched so far that I was a huge oversight on my part to not bring up. So if you guys would be willing to vote on this, I propose that Margot Kidder's Lois Lane should be in the Hall of Him.
Oh, yes. I agree. Am I the only one?
Apparently no one.
I guess I'm the only one. Matt muted himself.
I also agree. I was expecting Matt to speak, so that's why I wasn't saying anything, but I also agree.
I also agree that, yes, Lois Lane should be in the Hall of Him, because she is a badass.
I mean, Margot Kidder's Lois Lane is just such a badass. And as previously established, we're using him in an entire. I know this is nonsensical, I guess, but entirely gender neutral term. For he, she's, and theys.
Who cares, man? No one fucking cares.
Okay, I'm glad we agreed on that. I would have been a little bit annoyed if one of you had said no.
Is that our first female entry?
Jason, I'm not sure why you're so surprised. This Hall of Him is only like a week old, and it's technically only a day because it's been only used for a day, so...
Yeah, I said there's only 3. We'll call our inaugural class, Snipes is Blade, Keaton's Batman, and Kidder's Lois Lane. But, I mean, y'all, if you guys ever come across one that you think should be added, feel free to propose at any given episode. But it's got to be on air. We're not voting on these things off air.
Anyway, how are those really shitty plaques going, Jake?
All right. Oh, yeah, I have, if I haven't already sent them out from last episode, I have created shitty... like semi-intentionally shitty plaques for our inductees that will go out every time someone is voted in to the Hall of Fame, and it will also denote if they're given a built different distinction. So
I hope they just
look forward to those.
I didn't actually get to see them. I hope they just look like shitty gold stars.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll see them. I didn't send a picture, I don't think. You'll see them when they're out. I mean, I can show y'all if you want, but my plan is to just drop them online. Okay, anyway, so this episode we're covering X2 X-Men United, which was released May 2nd, 2003, written by Zach Penn, David Hayter, Michael Dowdry, and Dan Harris, shot by Newton Thomas Siegel. As we discussed in our X-Men episode, it would be great if you could donate to malesurvivor.org or rain.org, 2 wonderful organizations dedicated to helping survivors of sexual assault. The former is committed to preventing, healing, and eliminating all forms of sexual victimization of boys and men through treatment, research, education, advocacy, and activism. The latter is the RAIN, RAINN.org. It stands for the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They have an app as well as a national sexual assault hotline, 800-656-HOPE, as well as a chat now feature on their website. So please, if you have a chance, look into those, think about donating. But moving on, this movie stars an ensemble cast of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Famke Janssen as Jean Grey, James Marsden as Cyclops, Halle Berry as Storm, Anna Paquin as Rogue, Rebecca Romijn as Mystique, Shawn Ashmore as Iceman, all of those returning from the first one, plus notable newcomers to the franchise, Brian Cox as William Stryker, Kelly Hu as Lady Deathstrike, and Alan Cumming as Nightwing. I'm sorry, Nightcrawler. What did I say Nightwing for? Anyway, Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler. So, had you all seen this movie before?
I have seen this. I will say, honestly, from between the first X-Men to, like, First Class, all of those movies are very, very blurry to me because I haven't seen them in a long time. So this, even though it wasn't my first time watching it, it was definitely, like, it felt like a new experience.
It wasn't my first time, but as Jason stated, and my situation is very similar to his, I have not seen this movie in years. The only really like scene that I generally remember is the Lady Deathstrike fight scene between Wolverine and, as I mentioned, Lady Deathstrike. And that's really it. I don't really remember like anything about the movie. I don't even remember the plot of the movie, so... Well, there we go. That's what this whole podcast is for, is just to rewatch these things and decide whether we like them or not. And the results are pretty solid so far. I have yet to be met with a disappointment. But anyway, moving on.
Well, I'm assuming you mean a disappointment in something you thought you would like and didn't. Because we've watched plenty of stinkers.
So far, my expectations have been met.
Okay, I was just going to say, I was like, you telling me you were like, Supergirl,
so far, all my expectations have been met, generally. It doesn't really like, it's not like the opposite of what I was expecting.
Okay, yeah, that's at some point we should talk about, when we're further down the line, we should probably talk about like surprise hits for us and surprise duds.
That would definitely be fun to talk about later on when it's some more movies that we've seen before.
In terms of me, I vaguely remember seeing this movie, but it has escaped my mind from when I was a child. I do remember the same fight scene that Matt talked about, but that was it, and I don't really know if I remembered too much about it, which was interesting to go back to it because I actually kind of enjoyed getting to see it again.
I'm right in the same boat. I remembered even less than y'all did. I don't even remember. I didn't even remember that fight scene going into this. I was pure. The only thing I remembered was I was like, I think this is the one where Nightcrawler shows up, and that was all I had.
I'll round it out because I'm in a similar boat too. I probably remember it the best because I last watched it a few years ago, when I watched through these. But that was still a few years ago, and I kind of just mostly had like a rough outline of like the concept of the movie, because other than that, I hadn't watched it. Like, we were all very young when this movie came out, so I never saw it in theaters, and when I watched it, I was a kid still, so my memory's only so much there. Though the one thing I always sticks out is Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler has been one of my favorites, but this movie has a hell of an opening with him. So on that note, the plot begins at the White House, where a brainwashed teleporting mutant named Nightcrawler attacks the President of the United States, wounding several agents. He's shot and retreats. Meanwhile, Logan explores an abandoned military installation at Alkali Lake in Alberta for clues to his past, but finds nothing. Jean Grey has been having premonitions and struggles to concentrate as her powers become increasingly difficult to control. Later, Logan returns to Professor X's school for mutants, and Xavier tracks Nightcrawler using Cerebro. Xavier and Cyclops go to question the imprisoned Magneto about the attack, thinking he could be responsible, or at least know something, while the X-Men Storm and Jean Grey retrieve Nightcrawler. Military scientist Colonel Stryker approaches the president and receives approval to investigate Xavier's mansion for their ties to the mutants in the wake of the recent attack, using evidence of the Black Hawk jet on their campus. Stryker's forces invade the school and abduct some mutants. Colossus leads the attack. Colossus leads the remaining students to safety, while Logan, Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro escape. And Stryker's assistant, Yuriko Oyama, or Lady Deathstrike, captures Cyclops and Xavier. During the attack, Logan confronts Stryker, who addresses him as Wolverine and seems to know about his past. So, one thing right off the bat is this plot synopsis is maybe the most condensed that we've come across. So there's a lot to go through, but I do kind of want to start with the aforementioned opening, because I think this movie comes out with, as I said, one hell of an opening, a wonderful, captivating action piece of Nightcrawler teleporting throughout the White House. And it's the type of thing where if you're not familiar with that character, it's who is this? What are his motives? It's just really interesting. And then if you are familiar with Nightcrawler from outside of the movie, it's so out of character from what you know that it's intriguing, and you want to know, like, why are we in this situation where Nightcrawler is trying to assassinate the president? So that's really interesting. And then I also, cutting to a scene that's not really talked about here, but the X-Men in the museum, leading to Professor X kind of de-escalating a situation by basically temporarily, like, factory resetting all the humans so they're not, like, moving for a sec. And both of those scenes to me set, like, such an interesting tone of where humanity is at with mutant relations, and also showcase powers in a really exciting way.
Yeah, I agree with what Jake said. I'm glad you brought up, because I was gonna say the same thing of I just kept thinking about, while watching the beginning with Nightcrawler, thinking about if you weren't familiar with Nightcrawler at all, and suddenly you're seeing just like these flashes of this blue guy teleporting and whatever. So I also love that. It's so intriguing right from the jump.
I'm gonna add that, like, yeah, I honestly found it really interesting. It's definitely a great way to start a movie with that whole sequence. I just think, like, the way that it introduces Nightcrawler and the way that it goes about it, I think I really love the scene. I honestly thought it was a great way to start the movie. And also, yeah, like you said, does a great job at showing, like, everybody's powers and kind of going from there.
And like Jake said, it captures your attention and hooks you in, whether you know Nightcrawler or not. Because if you don't know Nightcrawler as a character, then you don't know, you're dropped into this mysterious, like, attack on the White House. And if you do know Nightcrawler as a character, then you're unclear of why he's doing this, because this isn't in character for him. So, like, no matter what your knowledge of the source is, it kind of captures you right away.
That's generally how it goes. I trying trouble like what to add. I guess this what I'll add is it does do a really good job at demonstrating Nightcrawler's powers. It also does a great job of just showing like how powerless people are against mutants. Like this Nightcrawler unhinged, like, well, first of all, it kind of spoiled. Like, I kind of spoiled, like, near the end of the film in which they revealed that Nightcrawler was brainwashed at the beginning, so that's a little bit of something. But anyway.
That's a good point. Yeah, you don't know when it's happening that he's brainwashed.
You don't know that Nightcrawler is being brainwashed. You just see a mutant attacking the president, and then you see him pull up a knife about to stab the president until he gets shot, and then he retreats, and the knife on it says, I believe, mutant freedom?
I know it has
so it's
now.
Not,
it's either mutant freedom now or mutant
right
rights
so
now.
They're not
It's
supposed to
something to that
reveal
effect.
that he was brainwashed. They were just thinking that he was, some kind of like liberation mutant who wants to kill the president because of, like the tensions between the humans and the mutants. Right now, the humans are planning to...
It seems like he's just an extremist.
And it's not until later in which you get to meet him, you realize, like, what the fuck? This dude is an extremist? There's no way. Because he's found, like, praying. He's very docile. He's very humble. He's very kind. But we'll get to that later. But it also did a very good job, yes.
I do think the movie kind of, though, between the museum scene and the opening with Nightcrawler... and then the invasion from Stryker's forces on the school, it kind of slows down a little bit. The movie kind of comes out with this like breakneck pace of those two really intense scenes. And then while there's some like nice moments in the middle there of getting to see mutants kind of use their powers for everyday life, like Bobby cooling the soda down with his ice powers, I do think it kind of hits a bit of a, not too long, but a bit of a slowdown before Stryker invades the school.
Yeah, it definitely, I don't think it like... wouldn't say that it like gets, it doesn't bore me as I'm watching that. It definitely is a bit of a lull when it comes out hitting like that, and then you kind of have to wait for more of that.
I was about to say, you kind of need to, mostly because it came out swinging with a big fight scene, and then shortly after it hits you with a humongous fight scene in the, in which Xavier's school was being attacked by Stryker's forces. And so you do need a little bit of downtime because they don't just be too much. You already got two big fight scenes within like the first, like, I would say like 45 minutes. And so you really need to know exactly what's happening and why these things are happening.
I feel like it's a symptom of just, you come out that hot,
exactly.
You do kind of have to slow down a little bit. So I do agree with Matt that it's just kind of a symptom of that, not necessarily the movie being paced poorly. But it still is a little,
I don't necessarily think it's paced poorly. To me, it's almost more of an issue with, like, we talked in the last one about how there's a lot of characters in these movies, and a lot of them are just kind of there. I think it's one of those things where because of that, they have to play catch up and be like, okay, this is what everybody's been up to. But I'd rather you just, like, excise what feels like filler to me and just keep a breakneck pace. It feels like this movie could have been, like, 10 to 12 shorter and just been like a really like fast-paced action movie. And that's not necessarily what they're going for right now, but I just think I would have preferred that in this instance.
Yeah, that's
I didn't
fair.
really feel like the tone, well, no, not the tone, the pacing really like slowed down a lot, mostly because, like, as I mentioned before, like, it was so fast at the beginning that I just needed to slow down, right? I needed to like digest what exactly was happening, and they did. And because there wasn't a lot of exposition before as to what was happening, it came in the middle in which they needed to. But I'm glad it did, because it did have a good payoff in the end. But I can't talk about that now because we're not that far at the plot yet. But I do want to talk about when Stryker's forces is invading Xavier's school. That is a great fight scene. That really showed Wolverine's powers. Even though we did get a good taste of it in the first movie, we basically got like ice bucketed with like Wolverine just dicing people up in the most PG way possible.
It was still oddly PG in this, but like they do it a lot better in this.
The first one.
This
one, as Sean said, is much better. But of course, you can't have blood. You can't do all that. You can't see appendages being sliced off. We're far off from Logan, but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you that this one's better in that sense. I was actually thinking that while watching the movie that Wolverine
It's
was
mostly
just
because
cooler in this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he
it's
just
because
does
he's
cooler
given
shit.
stuff to do. It also helps that Hugh Jackman like gained like 50 pounds of muscle between like the last X-Men to this one. Like, this is like the Hugh Jackman we see now, like the super buff one that bends iron bars.
That definitely does help, but I do think, in general, I think this movie with Wolverine does a better job of like depicting that action in a PG-13 way than most like PG-13 action movies now. I think that it's a pretty... I think he's, it threads that line pretty well of him being actually cool and using his claws while still fitting the PG-13 requirements.
Yeah, I think the only thing I just found hilarious was whenever he stabbed someone, there was like, his claws would come out perfectly clean.
Yeah.
As much as I don't think that's like a terrible thing, that's just what you have to do to make it PG-13. I just find it funny that every time I look
it also
at him,
helps
like,
that he leaves like no indent on their clothes whatsoever, so it looked like he stabbed them with like magic pixels, or like some air claws which killed them from the inside. But it was still pretty cool, and it's like it's like one of the things like you blink if you miss it moment. So you really only notice that on like previews and rewatches. But honestly, it doesn't really matter for me. I still like the scenes. Although the one criticism I have was you have like a lot of characters in the Xavier household, like Iceman, like Pyro. Although Pyro, there's a good reason why he doesn't use the powers. And then like Rogue. And they only really highlight Wolverine. We don't even really get like a highlight as to Iceman's powers until like when they were trying to escape, and Iceman helps Wolverine escape by forming an ice wall between him and Stryker and his forces.
That actually kind of brings up something I wanted to mention, in that I think it's cool in a sense how they put a lot of X-Men characters in, like Colossus or Shadowcat, that have like little cameo moments in these movies, and that's sort of neat, and I guess is better than not using them at all. But at the same time, like, I can't help but feel disappointed when characters as great as those are just kind of reduced to, hey, this guy in the school is Colossus.
And he wasn't even Russian. That's the worst part.
Like, I don't really know that there's a solution there, because I'm already complaining about it being overstuffed. But that's the worst part,
like, he wasn't even Russian. He just talked like a jock, and I hate it so much. But I also believe the reason why we don't get that many X-Men characters is the reason why we don't have, like, Beast or, like, Sentinels. I think this movie had, like, a big budget cut thing going on, in which a bunch of, like, planned characters were taken out. I'm not even sure that Colossus was like a part of that, and that's the reason why, even though he's in the movie, he's in it for so little. But yeah, we don't even get to see him fight. Like, we get to see him turn metal, the soldiers try to shoot him, of course it bounces off of him, but then we don't even get to see him like throw people against through the wall. We just see we just see like the other side of the wall. We just see the soldiers getting thrown through it. We don't see Colossus doing it, so we honestly don't even get to see him do any action. It was just all Wolverine, and which is cool. What Wolverine does, what Logan does, is awesome. But I just wish there was more variety in the action.
I mean, that's going to be an issue, I think, as we continue through the X-Men franchise, the over focus on Logan, and also just the lack of adapting certain stranger elements, more out there elements of X-Men. And I don't want to I'm going to have a lot to say about that later, especially as they start to, sort of soft adapt some of that, but, be too scared to do the more out there elements. But on a more positive note, one of the things that I think the franchise does well, and that is showcased in the raid on the school, is the level of stakes. I think they do a really strong job making it feel like the characters are actually vulnerable. And when you're seeing this jarring imagery of a paramilitary private organization led by this religious fanatic raiding a school and trying to abduct children because of who they are and can't help being, that's jarring. But I think only two movies in, it already does, to me at least, feel like, yeah, characters can get hurt and bad things can happen, and it's not like they just they come in and they get the jump on everyone and they succeed in certain goals that they have. And I appreciate that because I think it's all too easy in like superhero movies to make characters feel sort of invincible and really remove the stakes. But I haven't really noticed that too deep as far as the two movies deep as far as the X-Men go.
Yeah, that is very true. And I'm going to talk about one thing, and it's that they do a really good job of like establishing Stryker as like just basically a psychopath, and just he's basically a psychopath who just hates mutants so much. And I was going to say something that's going to be more relevant later on, so I'm just going to hold that off. But so in the beginning, when they're establishing his character, he's basically trying to tell the president how the mutants are a big threat. And I'm just going to spoil it. Mystique, disguised as a senator who died in the first movie, I believe, was pointed out one of the pictures of the Xavier school, and she pointed out that it's a school. And then he immediately rebuttals and says, no, it isn't. It just immediately establishes what he thinks of mutants. And it's just like, it makes his actions make sense. It doesn't make it like come out of nowhere that he just hates mutants and just sees them as creatures. He doesn't even call mutants like human beings or sentient beings. He just calls them creatures later on in the series. He just does not see them in any sort of positive light.
I want to move forward on the plot a little bit, though there's because there's so much more I want to say, but I want to move it on a little. But I do just want to say I'm surprised that Jason didn't bring up the InSync usage.
Oh yeah, I did appreciate that. I laughed at that actually. I laughed when that happened because I don't, like I said, most of these X-Men movies until First Class are kind of a blur to me. So I didn't remember that at all, but I do appreciate some NSYNC.
And it's a nice moment of brevity after like a pretty intense moment.
Yeah, also NSYNC, second best boy band of all time to One Direction.
Oh, hey, well, you have to drop more in-depth rankings another time.
One day.
So the shape-shifting Mystique gains information about Magneto's prison and helps him escape while also discovering schematics for a second Cerebro. She helps him escape via injecting more lead into a guard that she roofied so that Magneto can pull the lead out of his blood. Iron. Why am I saying lead? So she injects more iron into him so Magneto can rip it out.
Yeah, everyone knows we have lead in our blood.
I just misspoke. So Magneto can rip the iron out of his body and escape prison, which is just fucking crazy, so I don't want to brush over that. Meanwhile, Logan, Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro visit Iceman's parents and brother in Boston and meet up with Storm, Jean, and Nightcrawler. Fuck Bobby's parents fuck Bobby's family, but specifically his brother, who calls the cops on them and lies that they're being held hostage by mutants. The X-Jet is attacked by fighter jets while flying back to the mansion and is shot down, but Magneto saves them from crashing. Magneto explains to the group that Stryker has built the second Cerebro and plans to use it to force Xavier to telepathically kill every mutant on the planet. Stryker's son, Jason, a mutant with mind-controlling powers, whom Stryker will use to force Xavier to do so. He's basically experimented on his own son after blaming his son for the death of his wife. Stryker had also previously used Jason's powers to orchestrate Nightcrawler's attack as a pretense to gain approval to invade the Xavier mansion. As Matt referenced before, Magneto also tells Wolverine that Stryker was the man who grafted his adamantium skeleton onto his bones and is responsible for his amnesia. Jean reads Nightcrawler's mind and determines that Stryker's base is underground in a dam at Alkali Lake, where Wolverine was at the start of the movie, looking for information about his past. So again, there's a lot that's like really condensed there. I think most notably the interaction with Bobby's family. And then the police confrontation after that, where you have as I said, Bobby, Iceman's brother, calls the police, lies. The police show up, ready to shoot at these people that have done nothing wrong. Even shoot Wolverine in the head, though obviously he survives thanks to his healing ability. You see the bullet come out of his forehead. It's cool, and it kind of sets Pyro off, and is like. Pyro's arc in the movie is really him moving towards the Brotherhood and Magneto's side of things. So there's a lot going on there, and I think it is the scene that really hits home on the movie's themes of further exploring the hatred that mutants are going through, and that there is an active movement for genocide. and there's like no two ways about it. That's what people are trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that it even, that scene even hits well on like the more like subtle forms of prejudice that the X-Men are kind of meant to represent, in the sense that like you see Bobby, he has been lying to his family that he's in a prep school, not in this mutant school, because he doesn't want them to know that he's a mutant, because he's ashamed and because of how the world views him. And it then they go to his parents' house, and they're accepting in the words they're saying, but they're still being like weird and off-put by it. And I think that's I think that's a really good commentary on how the subtle ways that prejudice and hateful beliefs can even pollute in small ways, the conversations we have with each other.
That's an excellent point, because I think it does showcase different levels of it. You said Bobby potentially having a little bit of internalized hatred for himself, as well as Bobby's brother, who obviously is a lot more outward with that hatred. But then Bobby's, I believe he has a second sibling who's just kind of sitting there. You don't really get much out of that character. Maybe you could potentially see that as just acceptance. But Bobby's parents, who are like sort of trying to be supportive, but also hit him with that, have you tried not being a mutant?
Right.
And
they're being really supportive. They think they're being as supportive as they can be, but really they're just kind of making him feel more unaccepted with these slight little things, these slight little jabs at him.
It's the type of thing where you like hope that they could learn, type of,
exactly.
that you can fix ignorance. You can't fix hate necessarily, at least not very easily. But it also hits a little funnier now that, like, again, in like late 2010s early 2010s you had Iceman being canonized as gay in the comics. Wasn't the case at the time, but I think the scene's a little bit almost ironically funny when you have a lot of the language used towards Bobby is what people would say to a gay child, a trans child of theirs. That was not the case for the character at the time, but now is.
I also thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
How that kind of, in some sense, unintentionally ended up coming around full circle.
I think to like add to that too, I think it just goes to show how much the X-Men and the metaphor that it stands for is so timeless, because it can apply to any marginalized group, and I really love and appreciate that that's something that you can see even in this movie and throughout any of the X-Men stuff. It's just really neat.
It's timeless and it's poignant because it's just, it's something that so many people deal with, and that is such a big part of the world, that I think having the X-Men be in existence and as a fictional group that portrays that is so important. And I think that scene shows it so well. I mean, even like Jake mentioned them shooting Wolverine. Cops shooting at people is not an unknown issue in today's world. So that is poignant today, and it sucks that it's still poignant today, but it is. And I love that we can look back on this, and it's such a powerful piece still now, and it still is apt now, and it is, I just think that's great. That's all I have to say.
To build on that, I mean, one of the tragedies of it being relevant today is, so, I mean, to circle back, you talk about the X-Men being created by a couple of Jewish men in the 60s, and all of the X-Men being white. And as a metaphor for marginalized groups, you talk about, for a lot of Jewish people, they can be, quote unquote, white passing. But then you start to get into ideas of mutants like Nightcrawler that can't pass as humans. People in marginalized groups that can't necessarily pass as white. And there's different struggles for those who can and those who can't. But then you talk about the scenes in this movie from 2003 and the things you're seeing happen in 2023 in terms of the treatment of trans and non-binary people, with politicians and people in that sphere calling for an outright genocide, to remove transgenderism and trying to pass laws to ban gender affirming care, drag, anything to do with something that's not just anything queer, basically. And that's what I think makes Stryker such an effective and truly scary villain, the most, to me, terrifying that we've encountered so far in the podcast, because he is a religious fanatic who is actively, calling for the eradication of a group of people. And that is so real, and I think that's a reason why throughout time the X-Men have increasingly become very popular in the queer community. You have Grant Morrison, who they wrote a very acclaimed run of X-Men in which they made a point to say, mutants, like any other group of marginalized people, are going to kind of develop their own culture and certain cultural elements to them. So let's write in what's mutant fashion like, and mutant music, and that, how does a group of people live when they're kind of in that unchosen isolation. And for a movie that's 20 plus years old now, it's just watching it really hit hard on just how much there is to go for a lot of people. And it's not to say, obviously, you talk about people of color, and there's a lot of stuff to fix there. But it's just with everything in the news currently, it was impossible for me to not be watching this through that lens of what is happening to queer people, trans people, non-binary people.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said, I agree with, but I just, I think it's important to look at this film not just as a comic book film. I think it's so easy to write off superhero movies as superhero movies, but when you talk about a group like this, it has so much impact and so much to say beyond just superheroes and saving the day and this and that and all the cliches that come with that. And I think that this movie does that well. I think it shows that, in that scene particularly, shows well how those marginalized groups feel sometimes, and how it can be a struggle in day-to-day things, and whether it be from a bigger power like the government, or in this case in the film Stryker, or whether it be something on a smaller scale, like even your family just disapproving of you. It's something that's so important for the world to know. And I felt that watching this. Rewatching it with an adult lens, I really felt that. That's all I got.
Disguised as Logan, Mystique infiltrates Stryker's base. She lets the rest of the mutants in, and Magneto and Mystique go to disable Cerebro before the brainwashed Xavier can activate it. Storm and Nightcrawler rescue the captured students, and Jean fights a mind-controlled Cyclops. Their battle-free... Excuse me, I had to burp. Their battle-free Cyclops damages the dam, which begins to rupture, threatening everyone's lives. Logan finds Stryker in an adamantium smelting lab and remembers it is where he received his adamantium skeleton. He's getting a lot of traumatic flashbacks. Logan then fights and kills Yuriko, Lady Deathstrike, and then chases Stryker to a helicopter pad and chains him to the helicopter's wheel. Magneto stops Cerebro, and using Mystique impersonating Stryker to command Jason, has Xavier redirect its powers on humans, now trying to kill every human on the planet. The two subsequently use Stryker's helicopter to escape, accompanied by Pyro, who has been swayed to Magneto's views. Nightcrawler teleports Storm inside Cerebro, where she creates a snowstorm to break Jason's concentration and free Xavier from his control. So, once again, a lot of stuff really hyper-compressed there. So, I do think it's kind of neat to get to see the Brotherhood and the X-Men work together here against a common enemy. I think that's really nice. I think the movie then kind of ruins it by doing the whole, well, let's have Magneto now try to commit genocide thing. To me, there's a big gap between saying Magneto wants to pull, assassinations of particular high-profile anti-mutant individuals, and Magneto wants to commit genocide against every human on the planet. And I just think that makes it so, boringly black and white that I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to say that I think black and white's a good way of putting it, because I think so much of this movie kind of shows the gray area, in the sense that, like you said, the Brotherhood and the X-Men are working together, and it kind of shows that even though they disagree so much on how to get to the goal that they both ultimately want of mutant acceptance and mutant empowerment, that even though they're so different in their goals on how to get there, they can still come together to agree that this guy is wrong and he's in the wrong. And it kind of throws that to the side with Magneto, just ending up being the bad guy too.
Yeah, I didn't really I don't know if it was, to me, obviously these movies can get cartoony, but that felt like a cartoony evil villain, like have to destroy the world kind of ending. And for everything else that these movies have had, the X-Men movies have had, it just doesn't feel as nuanced as it should be, when everything else in these movies tend to be fairly nuanced. So it just kind of, it took me out of it.
Yeah, it felt like to me like his motivation in doing that was simply because he's a quote-unquote bad guy, and because that's what a quote-unquote bad guy should do in a scenario in that movie. But when it comes down to like the actual character and the message of the film, it just kind of gets messy when you have him completely switch on a dime, and not switch on a dime because I guess that was his motive all along, but to have that be his motive, to me, takes away from the greater message of the rest of the film.
Yeah, it just feels outright lazy to have because there's an actual moral quandary in if you're talking about a civil rights movement and these people fighting for their right to live and the right to live happy, being like what's the line in terms of violence, in terms of death, versus being like there's pretty much no way you could ever justify killing outright innocent people, especially billions of them. So rather than like actually having a scenario where you have to stop and think about where that line falls for you and what you believe in, you just get to be like, oh, well, that's bad. So that's just so much less interesting, and hurts so much of the other things the movie's doing, because you have these things where like Pyro has this conversation with Magneto on the plane where Pyro says to him, they say you're the bad guy, and Eric says, oh, is that what they say? And the idea of is he the bad guy or not just kind of melts away. There's no debate when he just wants to kill all these people who have done, many of whom have just, some of them are mutant allies. So
yeah, I think that they show the extremism of Magneto in much better ways in certain aspects of, him, earlier on wanting in the first movie wanting to make everyone a mutant, or that was his plot, right? In the first one, for the most part. To me, this wasn't a good display of him being an extremist in wanting the best for mutants. It was just him kind of being a giant piece of shit.
I also want to talk about, because both Sean and Matt kind of mentioned it at the jump, the very memorable fight between Yuriko and Wolverine. I think it's a super, my brief thoughts are that it's a super well choreographed fight, and that Lady Deathstrike's death is really just really sad, because similar to also what's happening with Jason, you're talking about a mutant that's basically been trapped into serving someone that hates them, and then ultimately having to be killed. You can see that Wolverine really doesn't want to do that. In a very excruciating fashion, injecting her with liquid adamantium so she sinks to the bottom of this tank for everything that she's doing is against her will. It's just it's a painful watch when you think about it.
Yeah, that death is also surprisingly brutal for PG-13. That's the one part that surprised me looking back.
I agree with that. It definitely is brutal, because especially when you think about it, he's just drowning her with hot metal. That is some sick shit. But also, in the greater sense, I think they show that scene well, because it shows his he kind of has some what's the word, hesitance to do it, but he realizes it's his real only way out. So I think that shows his heroic side well, that he doesn't want to do that, but it's his only way.
Well, I don't think he was hesitant to kill her because he was in a desperate situation, but he was kind of in the moment, and then he saw a way out, which was pumping her full of adamantium, and then when he finally did it, he realized what she was, and she was basically a brainwashed mutant when he saw her eyes clear, and then he winces when he sees her regain consciousness, and then being realized she's being pumped full of freaking molten metal. And so he realized what he's done. He winces, and he's not proud of what he's done. He looks away because he's realized of what he has done. And well, I know it's like a detail, but when she like sunk into the water and then just went boom, like metal being hitting the ground, it's a cool detail. But I don't know, I laughed unintentionally. I don't know why I found that funny, but
I don't know why either.
I think it's weird that he laughed at that, but I will say that everything he said before that is a better way of saying what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
so just listen to what
it's because it's sad. Because like because it was established in the beginning.
It's sad. Wolverine realizing that she's
brainwashed.
Another version of him, basically, that he would have been in her position had he not escaped, and definitely feeling like he's a killer, even though he doesn't.
I mean, we even see at the beginning, like
a lot of the guilty carries.
We even see at the beginning, like the drug that Stryker was basically putting her on was starting to wear off, and she's like starting to become more aware. And then he like drags her head down, puts more of the drug in her neck, and then she just becomes a robot again. Like, it's clearly like the drug making her doing all these things. This is clearly not what she wanted to do, but unfortunately, is taking a complete effect over her, and she basically does his beck and call. And unfortunately, she fought Wolverine with an adamantium pump right next to him. So it's just really unfortunate. It is really sad. But like, yeah, like just seeing Wolverine I don't know. It's just like I'm getting like lost in my thoughts right now. But I'm basically what I'm trying to get at. It is a really, really sad scene, and it's just more of the prejudice that these mutants go through. Like they're basically made to serve. They're being brainwashed, and they're forced to kill themselves in this scenario, and it's really, really sad.
But like, bro, sick fight though.
It was a sick fight. That fight was amazing.
Was a sick fight.
It was a sick fight.
It was a very sick fight.
Which was why this is like the scene that I remember. And yeah, Wolvie just realizing that she has the same powers that he does, and just seeing that signature Hugh Jackman eyebrow raise, it was great. This is
Jackman.
It's 10 times better than The Rock. The Rock has nothing on Hugh Jackman. In fact, I
tend to agree.
The Rock's eyebrow raise is overrated.
Why did you even make the comparison?
Huh?
Because The Rock raises his eyebrow.
Exactly.
I know, but they're so different other than that.
Well, I understood.
Yeah, see? Fuck you, Jake.
You know what? Listen, don't talk to Matt like that, all right? Don't ever
I'll quit.
him
I'll quit.
on my podcast.
I will not hesitate to quit.
Right?
I'm gonna sit my white ass down and listen.
Exactly.
You lose your only minority, and you will lose many privileges once I leave.
I do want to say though, also on the topic of what the fuck is that woman's name? X-23?
No, you mean Lady Deathstrike?
Wait, in this movie?
Yeah, you mean Lady Deathstrike? It's not X-23.
Lady Deathstrike, or Yuriko is her first name.
Her.
How come I know this and you don't, Jason?
I
Jesus Christ, Jason, what are you gonna say?
I knew it was no. I actually have a completely. This isn't nearly as stupid as that. I got the stupidity out of the way.
I got the stupidity out of the way.
Her character, as well as Stryker's son, Jason. I don't like using him by name because my name's Jason, but Stryker's son. I think that those are also great characters that are very that basically are like allegories in my eyes to like how racist people or homophobic people or people who there are so many people who stand against certain groups and support things that go against the prosperity of those groups, but will still listen to the music or buy the clothes that are attached to that culture, that group. In the same, like, for example, I'm sure all of us can think of people that we went to high school with that were probably the most racist people we've met, but also only listened to hip-hop. And I think, like, that's a very simple way of putting it, but it's kind of the same idea of this person who's so vehemently against it, but when it serves him and when it's something that he can use to help him, when it's something good for him, then it's okay. It's okay for Lady Deathstrike and Jason to be using their mutant powers because it's for him, and it's for him his own cause.
I mean,
Wonderful
that's a good
point.
point.
Wow.
For me, I just saw it as like he just sees them as tools to an end, and then he just uses them as weapons. He doesn't really see them as people.
I don't think that that's an incorrect way of reading it either.
It's definitely a more simplistic way of looking at it.
I think those are complementary. I think if you're the type of person that has a prejudice against any group of people, but then also absorb and appreciate elements of their culture, of their art, which again, obviously it's fine to do. There's nothing like inherently wrong with like being white and listening to hip hop as the example that Jason previously used or any of that. But I think that, I mean, to what Matt's point is of saying that Stryker uses them as a means to an end, I mean, I think that's it. You're probably not viewing these people as human if you're absorbing stuff that they make, but discounting them as people. And Stryker is using these people's natural gifts for his own personal gain and then discarding them like they're subhuman.
Well, yeah, like he even treats his own son like that.
The example that I think of too is like Lil Nas X once, like someone tweeted at him and was like, I don't fuck with the gay shit, but this song is hard or something, and he like replied to them and said, if you say shit like this, don't bump my shit, because it's like it's that same idea of like, if you're not gonna support that culture and that group, then but you're still gonna use it for your own selfish needs, it's the same ideal, and so I think what Matt said is also accurate.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, the only reason why they fuck with that shit is because they can't steal it anymore. Because back then they just straight up stole it.
He is correct.
This is true.
Who do you think invented rock and roll? It's not Elvis Presley, by the way.
100%.
Good points. I mean, I think that's a really strong connection that I hadn't thought of in terms of that parallel to real life between Stryker's use of weaponized mutants.
Yeah, that was just all I could think about watching it.
No, that's really good. That's insightful, man. So, let's move on with the plot rather than just continuing to jerk ourselves off here. The X-Men. Really wrapping up the plot. The X-Men flee the dam as water engulfs it, killing Stryker, who had previously offered Wolverine information about his past to let him escape, but Wolverine removes his dog tag and basically says, not worth it. But the X-Jet loses all power and struggles to take flight as flood water rushes towards them. Jean sneaks off the jet and telepathically wishes the team goodbye, talking to them through Xavier, as she holds back the floodwater just long enough for them to escape. As the jet raises above, the flames erupt around her body, and she lets go, allowing the flood to crash down and kill her, or at least presumably kill her. The X-Men give Stryker's files to the president, and Xavier warns him that humans and mutants have to work together in order to build peace. Back at the school, Xavier, Cyclops, and Logan remember Jean, and Xavier begins to hold the class. Meanwhile, a phoenix-like shape rises from the flooded alkali lake. So that's how the movie wraps up, and that actually kind of gets to the gist of the wrap-up. So in terms of the flood scene and Jean's death and saving of the X-Men, I feel that in isolation it is a well-done scene. It is important stakes. I think it's emotional the way she talks to both Logan and Scott specifically, but really all of the team through Charles, and her death there's a level of impact there, and again that level of feeling like characters aren't necessarily safe in these movies. That said, I kind of almost it's an unfortunate setup to, I don't want to get into the X-Men: The Last Stand and its attempt, the first attempt to adapt the Dark Phoenix saga to live action, because we will talk about that when that movie comes up. But it's hard to not watch this knowing that emotional death scene is really just set up for a really, really clunky movie.
Yeah.
And also, things are a little bit limited just because Jean is so underdeveloped in these movies and basically just used for Scott, also undeveloped, to fight with Logan over, that while it is really well done and emotional, like in isolation, when you're looking at the whole of both the first and second X-Men movies, I'm kind of like, who really was Jean?
Yeah, that was my thing, was that I never really got to really get close to Jean's character, because she wasn't really that prevalent in the first movie, because she was just basically serving as a love interest, and like the premise of a love triangle between Logan and Scott. And then she mostly does the same thing here. She does get some development in this movie, but it's not enough to care about her, like, about her dying. When I was watching,
the biggest development we ever get for her is her dying. There we see the selflessness.
Yeah, exactly. Like we do see some
that,
things.
It's like, what?
We do see some things here and there, but it wasn't anything prevalent. It wasn't anything separated from Scott or Logan. So when she dies, you feel sad for Scott and Logan, but you don't really feel sad because she died.
I agree. I think it's a fine scene, but it definitely, Jean is underdeveloped in the first two movies, and it makes this scene less impactful because of that. You really only care about it in a human sense because it's a human dying who's, in the sense of this movie, the good guy. Other than that, like, the character's not developed enough for me to care that much that she's dying, so I agree with that. I don't remember what happens with her character in the next one, so I can't speak to what Jake's talking about.
Yeah, to me, it's like, speaking towards, I guess, the next X-Men movie, it's more like it feels heavily like a missed opportunity of, like, even though it's like, I don't feel like she's characterized much at all, and they don't really delve much into her, like, that could have been a good chance to, like, go more into her character, and I don't think there's any good way they could have gotten around this, and I don't think seeing this in the movie, it's fine. It's just, I don't think there's any situation where this could have gone well afterwards, I guess.
It's too little too late, I think, because if you really wanted to build to the Dark Phoenix saga, you should have made the first couple of movies more focused on Jean. Her and Scott should have been at least co-leads with Logan, but they're really not at all.
They mostly serve to be a love triangle for Logan and not anything else beyond that. They don't really serve to be their own characters. In fact, Scott doesn't really have like a character outside of loving Jean and being Jean's boyfriend, and then being like sort of an ass to Logan, but it's more like a fun, like, hate relationship. It's not like totally based on malice. But yeah, other than that, that's
just kind of a back and forth thing.
Yeah, exactly. But that's really they don't really have characters outside of each other and Logan.
To me, the best way I can put it is that it feels like something that should be a main story that they shoved into a side story.
I just feel like, if anything, we should have a love triangle on the pod.
Between who?
That's a good question.
Well, we're brothers.
You proposed it, Sean. I was expecting you to have an answer. Yeah, I think
you can only be one of
pick
us.
one. You can only pick one of me and Jake and Jason, and the other two will have to be you and Matt. So the question is, who is the third, me or Jason, and who is the one being fought over of the three people in the triangle?
It's a good question. Right, I think I should be the one being fought over.
Sound off in the comments.
I should be the one being fought
wants
over.
To be the one fought over.
I deserve to be fought over.
That's so on brand for him.
I deserve it.
That is very on brand. I'm not gonna lie.
No, I think Sean and I should fight over Matt, to be honest. I think that's the thing that makes the most sense.
Fair enough.
Damn.
That tracks.
I think I'm okay with that one.
Oh, I feel so popular right now.
Do you feel loved?
We're getting off the rails. A couple of things I wanted to say about the ending that I actually did fully like. I think the most effective emotional note, God, my audio is going to be clipping like fucking crazy, is Wolverine's conversation with Stryker, because of the fact that Wolverine is a fully fleshed out character and you understand how much learning about his past means to him. His decision to give that up, to not let Stryker out, actually means a lot, and it feels like a huge step for him to sort of start to move past that, and figure out who he is based off of who he wants to be and not what happened to him. And then I also do enjoy the scene in the Oval Office, because I feel like it's not as much as it should be, but it does feel like there's at least a lesson learned for Xavier in what Magneto does, that maybe he should start to be more aggressive, because it's a bit of a threatening scene. and a little bit of learning that like maybe just sitting here and like running a school isn't quite enough to actually get where we need to be going.
Yeah, I agree.
It's nice to see actual growth in core characters.
I agree with that. It definitely is more. It's more confrontational than any approach to the mutant cause that we've seen from Xavier to this point. So I agree that it definitely feels like it shows good progression in his character to kind of take at least some aspect of what Magneto does and build that into himself. So I agree with that. I think that's a very good scene at the end there.
So I think I honestly like the last scene. It definitely does a great job of I like seeing Xavier at the forefront of things and like making a push, and I like that part the most. I would have liked if they showed like what the president says afterwards, after the meeting and the confrontation with Xavier, but because I feel like it could have made the scene a little stronger, but I still think it was good.
That's what I was confused about. I thought it was going to be like a voiceover thing after, after they tell the president to make the speech, but I guess the message still got across.
I was just going to say I disagree, because not to hold this to the highest of quality like the Watchmen comic, but I think it's kind of the element of them not being a clear outcome of this confrontation with the president leaves it in the viewer's hands of, if you watch this movie and you don't jump ahead to, obviously there was future X-Men movies, but just in like if you were to end the story here, which when this releases, that's the case, it puts you in a situation of how do you as a viewer see the results of this? Is this going to make tensions worse or better? Is this going to help progress or hurt it? How does the president react? And I think that's a lot more interesting than if you just be like, right away, here's the outcome of this confrontation. Spoilers for the Watchmen comic, which ends with a similar "it's in your hands" thing.
But I do like that it's a little bit open-ended, because it's, with government officials, you never know how they're going to take something. So to have it kind of in the viewer's hand to decide how they think he took that information, I think that's good. I think that's better than if they had left in what he says next and how he reacts to it.
Don't get me wrong, I don't think that's a terrible notion for them to lead off on, and I like the idea of them leaving it in their own hand, leaving it in your own hands, and the viewer being smart enough to determine what. I feel like that would have been a poignant part to also include some sort of stance, and then seeing the given that there is a sequel to this, seeing the after effects of that stance provides a varying degree of, gray area, and in terms of especially from a political perspective, how do these, when you take a stance in any way, shape, or form, how does that affect the whole of the stage of politics, I guess, in that case. But I feel like there would have been a good, nice possibility for them to have a good, I don't want to say speech, because I don't want the movie to speak to me right at the end about to preach to me essentially, but I do think it would have been a good place to kind of maybe hone in on that with the writing anyways, and if done well, it could have turned out really great to have a poignant ending to sum up the message of don't treat marginalized groups terribly, but obviously written better and in a more nuanced and appreciative way. But I feel like there is a possibility for that to have worked at that moment.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that there's a version including that could be just as good, but I think it's just that I personally think that I prefer this to what that would have been.
Yeah, I guess it's just like anything else, it's a matter of personal preference. I see what Sean's saying, though.
No, nobody's allowed to have opinions. This podcast is not about opinions. This podcast is about facts.
If it's all right, speaking of opinions that are really just facts, with everyone, I'm going to move into my kind of overall final thoughts. What I don't like about the movie is just the definitely the use of last minute soft heel turning Magneto into straight up villain. I think the movie's a better, cleaner, and more intellectually and emotionally honest movie without the sudden switch of primary antagonist at the end. And as a whole, this movie to me just like further cements that Magneto's right. Obviously not about the genocide stuff of humans, but I just think that the movie does a really good job striking that balance right up until it doesn't, and then it's awful at it. There's a lot of little moments with Magneto. One that I wanted to bring up earlier with Pyro, in terms of another reason why I think this movie and the X-Men in general can really resonate with trans people, because you have this name that you choose for the identity that you have. And there's a point where Pyro looks at Magneto, and Magneto says, "What's your name?" And he says, "John." And he says, "Well, what's your real name, John?" And I mean, that's something that I have seen just through trans fans of the X-Men feeling really identified with the fact that throughout X-Men comics, there's this idea of your mutant name being your true name. And that's a moment in there that hits with that, and is one of the strong suits of why you can see Magneto's point of view, again, right up until they just make him evil. So that's probably my biggest issue, is this broad sweeping of Magneto into being bad and the cut and dry, overly optimistic view of Xavier. And then on the positive note of things, this is probably one of the best decisions of a story to adapt. So this movie is a very loose adaptation of the X-Men comic God Loves, Man Kills, which is a very quick read. It's an excellent read. You can read it no matter if you haven't read X-Men before. You can absolutely read it on its own. I highly recommend it. Written by Chris Claremont and drawn by Brent Anderson. So it's a pretty loose adaptation, but it was a graphic novel released outside of the core X-Men series, and it's a short story, like I said, a quick read, and because of that, you can adapt it with a lot of creative liberties that open a lot of things up for your own interpretations, but B, it doesn't make you have to cram, as talked about in our previous episode with Daredevil, where they tried to cram like so many years of storytelling into 1 2-hour movie. You're only condensing so much, and it allows a lot more freedom with how you pace your movie, how you write your characters, what you include, what you change from the source material. So I just really appreciate the decision to actually do that, because we're kind of going to be in the middle of an era where quite the opposite happens, like I said previously in Daredevil and in the upcoming X3. So I just kind of wanted to take a second to appreciate the decision to adapt both the quintessential X-Men story, God Loves, Man Kills, and to adapt something that is digestible in this medium and in the time frame that this medium allows. But I do recommend it. I prefer the original a little bit, but I think this is a good follow-up that continues to progress the characters of Logan, to an extent Magneto, and of Charles Xavier. So I think this is a pretty worthy follow-up of the first, and is definitely worth watching, in particular if you like the first X-Men movie.
You know, that doesn't really make sense when you dive into Nightcrawler's character, who is a man of faith, and who is a man who is not bothered by people seeing him and being terrified of him, and that he just sees them and just pities them, because we actually didn't go over this, but like, he pities them because I think he says they can't see beyond what their eyes see. I think that's the quote. It's not direct.
I forgot about that, and I'm happy you brought that up, Matt.
But that's the thing. See, that's the thing.
Thank you. We didn't talk about Nightcrawler enough. He's great.
Yes, 100%.
Thank goodness you said, you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about the great conversation that Nightcrawler and Storm had, and how Storm was basically saying that she hates humans, she doesn't forgive them for what they've done, and how Nightcrawler, despite being the most abnormal looking one out of most of the X-Men, no, of all the X-Men actually, because Mystique is in the X-Men, so he's he's the most out. How do I say this? He can't hide who he is. The others can't, right? Despite the fact that he is the one who looks the most different and therefore will be treated the most harshly out of everyone, he doesn't feel any kind of resentment toward people, because as I mentioned before, like, he says the reason why he doesn't feel hate for people is because he pities them, because they can't see beyond what their eyes see. And that's a really powerful quote. And Storm does respond by saying that she's angry because she's angry because it helps them survive. But then Nightcrawler rebuttals that by saying, so can faith. And so, like, it kind of goes back to the title of the comic that it's based on. God loves, man kills. The man of God, which is Nightcrawler, he loves instead of hating people. And I'm not even religious, but I find that really powerful, that a man chooses to chooses to use his faith to not resent the people who are literally trying to kill him. So yeah, it's really powerful. And I feel like I feel like he should be in the movie more, but at the same time they used him just right amount too, so can't be too mad.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. And I want to, as you mentioned, religion and you not being religious but still thinking that that's a powerful thing. I think that that's something that extends beyond religion, and if religion is what leads you there, then that's great, but that's loving and accepting people is something that stretches beyond religion, even though many religions preach it. Mm-hmm. And it's just an important human thing that he shows in this movie.
But yeah, like, he shows a lot of love, and that's why, like, you guys said you really didn't like that Magneto, like, the 180 of just trying to kill all the humans. But I didn't really see it that way. I just saw it as a man full of hatred, just taking it out on the people, on just like people in general, because you see him being in this prison and just being tortured, right? I'm not even sure if it's poison, but it looked like poison, seeing the shape of him by the time Xavier visits him. And just like him brutally killing the bodyguard just to get the iron from his blood, and then using the iron from his blood to, like, shoot them like bullets at the security guards in the chamber. He obviously was taking pleasure in their misery. And then he even says to Pyro, like, he doesn't view humanity like, he's almost the same as a Stryker, which does irk me a little bit, because as you guys mentioned before, like, it just makes it more black and white. But he's basically supposed to represent, like, the opposite of Stryker. He is a mutant who thinks of humanity as literal insects, and he thinks themselves as gods. And he told Pyro himself that you are a god living among insects. And it's just driving the plot home of, like, these men, these extremists, being driven by hatred. And because of that, they cause pain and casualties to both sides. And so that's why like, it makes, like, Nightcrawler such, like, a standout character, is because he is such a kind character. He is so kind to everyone, and he doesn't hate. It makes him really, really powerful in this movie. And it changes he helps, like, changes Storm's perspective, who from, like, the first movie, like, just made her stance clear that she does not like humans. It's like he is even able to, like, somewhat change her mind. And that's why I find that scene so powerful. But it came at the expense of making Magneto more cartoonishly evil. So there definitely could have been a better way of doing that. But that's how I viewed it. And that's why I didn't really mind it as much. But I do understand why you guys didn't really like it.
That's a good point. That's a really... I don't know. I like doing this with you guys because I do think we bring different things to the table, and that's an example of it. And I can't believe I didn't talk more about Nightcrawler myself, because I fucking love Nightcrawler in general.
Yeah, I also think Matt did a good job of explaining a whole lot of shit in a very concise way, and I don't think there's anything I can say that
excellent.
That.
Well, that's the thing, is, like, I love this scene so much, but because the synopsis skipped over it, we just skipped over it. It doesn't really... True. It doesn't really, like, because it's trying to condense a movie, it skips a lot of the parts.
So, Matt, I take it Nightcrawler is the high point for you?
He is the high point for me.
Do you have a low point, and, do you recommend the movie?
Well, of course I recommend the movie. I just gushed about it for, like, I don't even know how long. But yes, I do recommend the movie. And I'm pretty sure my low point is the same thing as everyone else's. Like, even though I understand why he became, evil, and they made him like the opposite. Well, not like the opposite, but he's basically Stryker, but on the other side. But I don't like that because it just made Magneto a very complex character, just more simplistic, and made him black and white. I understand why they did it, but I don't like it because it came at the expense of his character and his complexity. But other than that, I like the movie.
Obviously, I do agree with what Jake and Matt said. I think the Magneto twist is one of the weaker points. I also want to say that one of my least favorite parts is just, and this goes for the first movie too, the underdevelopment of both Jean Grey and Cyclops. I mean, those are both very important characters to the X-Men, very prevalent characters, and you have these emotional scenes with them that just don't hit as hard because they didn't spend as much time with those characters, and that just kind of sucks to me that we didn't, that death scene with Jean Grey, with how good that is, it could have been so much better if they had actually taken the time to give her more development and to give her more screen time generally. So that I also want to point out as probably my least favorite. I think my favorite part was, we talked about it at length, but the scene at Iceman's family house where he has to, bite the bullet and talk to them about being a mutant, because I think it just shows such a good depiction of like the day-to-day smaller instances of prejudice that marginalized groups go through. I mean, I've mentioned in whether it was the intro episode or one of the first episodes being queer. I still am. That didn't change. So, and I mean, like, watching that scene, I was born this way and I won't change. So that's how that is. But I even remember, like, watching that scene, I remember, not to be too personal, but I remember going to Applebee's after junior prom with my date, who was a man, and the waitress saying, "Oh, where are your guys' dates?" And it's like stuff like that that's like, it's small and insignificant, and I laugh about it now because I do find it a little bit funny, but it's also like so disrespectful to my lifestyle and who I am as a person. And I think that this movie depicted that so well in that scene. So big props to that in this movie. I can't say enough about that. So I've talked enough at this point. I do rec this movie. I think it's better than the first one. The first X-Men. I definitely recommend this movie. I think it's very good. It's better than I remember it.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to add anything better than anybody else has. Oh boy. But of my favorite parts, I think this movie in particular does a much better job comparable to the first one of delving into the themes a lot more, and you can, I think, especially considering how much we've talked about it, just in general, how much this one tends to hit on, like, again, that X-Men in general are very much a metaphor for marginalized groups, and it does such a great job of being that and being such a timeless thing that there's no lack of comparison to make for any of these characters to any marginalized group, whether it be any part of the LGBTQIA plus community or any of the or anything to do with racism. It's just I think that's just a long-standing thing that I love about the X-Men, and also is just such a great thing that I think they do a lot better with in this movie, or at least than the first one. So I give it some huge props there. As for what I don't like, I think I'm kind of in agreement with everybody else that, like, the worst thing is Magneto. I think the worst thing to me is just, it's not Magneto himself, but the ending and the way that they've portrayed him up to that point was like, okay, now it just feels cartoonishly villainy, when, like, this really should be a very gray character and not just, I'm going to murder all the humans now. Otherwise, I give this one a recommendation heavily. I think I put this one over the first one in my book. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's worth watching.
Thank you first of all, to the three of you, because I really enjoy recording these with you, and it just really hit today. I feel like we had a really nice conversation, bringing different things to the table on this movie, and I just wanted to appreciate that. But thank you to ALO VFX for our artwork, ALO VFX. You can follow me on Letterboxd, JakeWalter98. I post reviews for all these movies there and have like a running ranking for the podcast. Jason?
I made the intro-outro music for this podcast. I make music under the name The Upsides. You can find that on SoundCloud. You can follow me on Instagram at The Upsides PA, on Twitter at _Upsides PA. I'm working on a lot of stuff that'll be out eventually. It's very hard to make music, but I'm making a lot of progress, and I'm proud of myself, actually. So it'll be out eventually.
Awesome. If you're interested in continuing to check out the pod, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at illiterate_pod. Subscribe on YouTube. The channel name is Culture Illiterate Podcast. Follow us on Spotify. Again, Culture Illiterate Podcast. Email us any questions, comments, and we'll respond to them on air. cultureilliteratepod@gmail.com. Please watch our next episode. It should be an interesting one because we're going to be talking about Oscar-winning director Ang Lee's wild art house interpretation of Hulk from 2003.